But anyway, Fiverr now has decided that this kind of work is not enough. They need more.
PewDiePie went on Fiverr, and as a joke, he asked people to hold up a sign, "Death to all Jews, comma, subscribe to Keemstar." He's making a joke about Keemstar, making it sound like he's anti-Semitic. You're making me explain a fucking joke, which is always obscene, and the media who mischaracterizes him. And of course, they took it out of context. What year is this from? They were quite old. Of course, he cut out the year. It's out of context. What did Michael Jackson say to little kids in the middle of the night in his bedroom? Come on, me! I'm not a journalist. This is not the New York Times. What research do you expect me to do exactly? What did she say?
The world would be a better place without
I would say that she was joking, but she does not crack a smile. This woman is ready for a corona genocide.
You know, it really wasn't that long ago that I was waiting anxiously for the next H3H3 video of wacky and zany antics. They're one of the few channels that inspired me to get into commentary, actually. I love the idea of mixing fun skits in with the commentary about creators that have done some shady things, like Joey Salads and his historic race baiting. Now, Ethan has said in the past that they operated on sort of a moral code of only going after people they felt kinda deserved it. I wish I could say that I still felt this way about H3, but something has changed. As a commentary creator myself and a constant consumer of commentary content, there's a couple things that I feel are extremely important when you're making this kind of content. Even though most of us are just topical comedians, you're still talking about real topics, that your words can still have real impact. And some creators are harder for me to respect because they don't seem to respect that position, that responsibility. Ever since last year, I've become increasingly aware of how little research Ethan seems to do. The first time it really became an issue for me was regarding a conversation about the Joker film. In Colorado, at a showing of The Dark Knight Rises in 2012, a movie about Bane, Batman, and Talia al Ghul, there was a shooting done by a man in technical gear, a gas mask, dyed red hair, and not a single reference to the Joker. So obviously it was inspired by the Joker, right? I'm somehow not surprised and yet still disappointed that Ethan from H3 remembers the rumor and not reality.
And families of the 2012 movie theater shooting in Aurora where the guy like dressed up as Joker. Fucking lunatic.
You did?
Yeah, dude.
No, he wasn't actually dressed up as the Joker.
Well, he dyed his hair. It was during a Batman screening, and he like it was nuts.
Now, I knew before I saw this episode that it was rumor, not fact, but I thought it was very odd that Ethan tried to justify saying he dressed up as the Joker and going so far with that description by saying he dyed his hair, even though he didn't even dye it the same color as the Joker's hair or anything. It's not the same thing at all, my guy. And ever since that point in time, I've also become increasingly aware of how often Dan has to chime in to correct Ethan about things that he says in the moment. Keep in mind that these are the topics that Ethan supposedly chose himself to talk about. So who did the research? And on top of noticing Dan constantly chiming in, there's a lot of stuff that I notice when they're talking about stories I'm familiar with that doesn't get corrected. Kind of like when you donate to somebody, you follow them on Twitch, and then they read out your name and they butcher it, and then you're like, oh, that's not right. That's just not right, but you can't really correct them.
Jack Spedicy too. Jack Spedicy.
That's how it felt to me. And I just notice it more and more and more. While a lot of these things may seem small individually, combined they form a much more concerning and frustrating picture of a massive creator not doing his due diligence, possibly worse. Even going as far as to say he's not a journalist, he doesn't have that responsibility.
I'm not a journalist. This is not the New York Times. I'm some fucking dude who's about to watch my employee eat a jar of mayonnaise. What research do you expect me to do exactly?
What do you mean rethots? The main purpose of this video is essentially to catalog a bunch of the contradictions and hypocrisies I've noticed with Ethan over the last few years. To be fair, we're all hypocrites at some point in time, but the stuff that he seems to be getting wrong just doesn't seem to make any sense. It's really gotten to the point that I've lost just about all respect for Ethan, so I feel it's important to highlight this. I'm not kidding when I say that Ethan was one of the people that inspired me to get into commentary and comedy. Even if you're just telling jokes, it's important not to slander people or spread misinformation. Given how often Ethan has complained about people getting things wrong about them, it's insane how often he gets things wrong about other people. It's almost like he just does a more sophisticated version of the "but it was a joke" defense.
I activate my trap card!
So what does all this mean? It means, based on the information I'm about to show you, I think Ethan is walking a tightrope that he could slip off of at any minute. Kind of like he did recently on the H3H3Productions channel.
the world would be a better place without
Oh my God, Casey.
I would say that she was joking, but if you look closely at her face, she does not crack a smile. This woman is ready for Corona genocide. What are the kids calling it? The boomer doomer?
Now, if you haven't seen this clip before, what do you think she said? You think it was something derogatory? Did she say a slur, a no-no word? Did she say fireball? Because we truly would all be better off without the existence of fireball.
The world would be a better place without old and poor people.
Oh my God, Casey.
She said old and poor people. She made an obvious joke and said old and poor people. And if you're questioning whether it was a joke or not, I'm sorry that school was shut down because of the virus. Doing just a little bit of Google searching will show you that she does this kind of thing all the time because it's a character, it's a joke, it's deadpan humor.
I would say that she was joking, but if you look closely at her face, she does not crack a smile.
You would think that somebody who compared Larry David to a comedy god would understand deadpan humor.
Seinfeld, as you know, is mine and Eva's favorite show of all time. It's a trailblazing show that changed the landscape of comedy forever. Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David, the two greatest comedic minds came together to make this masterpiece that the world is not worthy of.
I would go as far as to call them gods.
We would even go as far as to call them gods.
The Fine Brothers once did a video on their React channel about the show Seinfeld and whether or not it held up in today's society. Now, a lot of the teens were very critical of Seinfeld, saying that it wouldn't be aired today or that it was offensive. Ethan and Gila didn't like that, so they made a video talking about it.
Dude, I'd be offended too. That's my dead dad's stuff.
That's the joke. I repeat, that is the joke.
That is the joke, that you would be offended.
Yeah, you would be offended.
It's not meant to be like a good presentation.
I feel like this is a good test for how sensitive people have become.
If you're not familiar with Larry David or Curb Your Enthusiasm, his entire show is based around him either being a bad guy in the show or coming off as a bad guy by accident because he's not being aware enough or because he's insensitive to people. If you're not aware, a lot of that style of humor is actually also present in Ethan's work.
I would say that she was joking, but if you look closely at her face, she does not crack a smile. Women are in a nature setting, to be conquered. I would say that she was joking, but if you look closely at her face, she does not crack a smile. He's entertaining.
Right. I love that I can just say though.
Yeah.
I couldn't really say that.
But if you look closely at her face, she does not crack a smile.
I gave him purpose, I gave him a job, I gave him a girlfriend, a love life, everything. I built him up to the man he is today. And I don't know what I do to deserve this disrespect.
But if you look closely at her face, she does not crack a smile.
So we've talked about how Ethan likes edgy jokes and he loves deadpan humor.
I've gone back and watched some of the old videos I used to make, back in Israel, before people used to watch our videos. And some of the stuff I was saying was outrageous.
So vulgar,
it shocked me. It was so vulgar. There was no hate or malice behind it, but I was so vulgar and so insensitive with the way I talked. I was so embarrassed by that person. So doesn't represent who I am and what I would say today and how I feel. I was deeply horrified and embarrassed of this stuff, and I wouldn't want to be judged by that.
You really can't make this stuff up.
Ask your grandma about shit she was saying when she was 18. Grandma, you once, it says here, Grandma, that you once called a black person a Negro. Negro's not that bad. Ela winced.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it's funny, the whole...
I don't even go there.
Yeah, Ela had a panic attack when I said Negro. I don't think that's bad. I didn't say it, his grandma did. That guy's grandma's a freaking racist, man. I was so vulgar and so insensitive with the way I talked, Grandma, that you once called a black person a Negro.
Now, if you didn't before, maybe you're starting to kind of understand where I'm coming from here. Ethan likes to make a lot of edgy jokes, likes to really, really push buttons on certain topics. And it makes his wife uncomfortable, visibly uncomfortable in many cases. It's hard for me to watch Ethan make such edgy jokes so consistently, but then he finds out that Kaceytron made this edgy joke that got her banned on a platform that's known for banning people for making edgy jokes. He then censored the clip or used a clip that was already censored and never clarified what was censored either way, seemingly to make her look worse. Not only that, I can't think of a single H3 video that's ever been censored. This may be the first time they've censored something, and it was for something that probably didn't need to be censored anyway. Either way, whether he censored the clip himself or not, he removed the context of what was actually said and then portrayed the joke as real. If Ethan's intention really was to make a joke here, then where was the punchline? saying that she's ready for genocide?
I would say that she was joking, but if you look closely at her face, she does not crack a smile. This woman is ready for corona genocide. What are the kids calling it? The boomer doomer?
He said he doesn't think she's kidding because she didn't smile, and that he thinks she's ready for genocide. Those aren't jokes. Those aren't jokes. There's no punchline. What's the I don't even know if you could use the it's a joke defense here. Now, if you've been following the H3 podcast and the H3H3Productions channel recently, you'll know that one of the major topics that they've been talking about a lot was the coronavirus. I mean, the whole video we're talking about here was titled Morons of the Coronavirus. Ethan has been very public about what I'd almost equate to activism on his part regarding the coronavirus outbreak. He's made multiple statements on podcasts, YouTube videos, and on Twitter, some of which even equating going to things like a concert or going out at all to murder. While yes, going to a concert the day after a state of emergency was announced is not a good idea, no. It's definitely a reach to call it murder. If you think about it by that logic, when I went to the grocery store yesterday, the number of people that were there, yeah, I committed murder by going to that grocery store. By the same logic that going to that concert made them all murderers. And before you say going to the grocery store is an essential, so it's a false equivalence to equate that to going there. No, I'm still coming in contact with the same number of people. It's a fair equivalence, much more fair than equating going to a concert to murder. In early March, I saw more sensationalism coming from Ethan than I did mainstream media. He even ran with this whole thing where he speculated that the US was going to be just as bad as Italy in what he seemed to be portraying as days. Italy had a massive wave of people that got sick and died very quickly. Now keep in mind, Italy was the only place that was reporting these kind of numbers. They were the only place in the world that was having this kind of impact at the time. But we for sure are going to end up like Italy, not like Japan, not like Africa, not like England, none of these other places. We're going to end up like Italy, because I said so. Now, even as I'm recording this video right now, according to the coronavirus map, we only have a 4% death toll in the US out of 500,000 people infected. While in Italy, they have, I think it's like 150,000 with a 12.73% death toll. We've lost 3,000 more people with over 300,000 more infections. That is, at least if this map is to be believed. He equated us to Italy, the most heavily impacted country, completely disregarding everyone else's stats. Said this is where our stats are gonna be. Then through fear, plain and simple, he starts talking about how millions of people are gonna be dead. Ethan, while campaigning to get the San Diego Comic-Con shut down, and admittedly rightfully so given the circumstances, put out this tweet essentially saying that the healthcare system in the US wouldn't be able to handle the influx of patients that were coming, noting at the end that 2% of the US population would be 7 million people. There's not the slightest bit of hope in this tweet. To me and many others, this didn't read as a warning, this read as a prediction. At the very least, what he's talking about here is the worst case scenario that we could have possibly imagined based on the stats at the time. For example, next time you hear that North Korea launched a missile, just assume that it's nuclear and it's going to hit the US. That's the kind of extremity we're talking about here. While he's not actually saying anything factual, this is sensationalism from an entertainer who doesn't need to do research because he makes jokes. Now again, I want to clarify all this because I'm not saying that corona is not a problem. I'm not saying he wasn't right to worry about this. What I'm saying is he's spreading misinformation. It seems to me that Ethan was acting out of emotion rather than rationale. There's a right way to go about things and there's a wrong way to go about things. Essentially, ethics. Now, all that is essentially supposed to serve as emotional context to why I feel he maybe censored this intentionally, to make her look stupid because he was actually offended by the joke she made. But just in case, let's give him the benefit of the doubt and assume it wasn't malicious. It wasn't intentionally trying to shame her or whatever. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt there. Let's go over the context as to why I think he may have not checked his facts on this. Let's talk about his history of defending people over context. Now let's start with the PewDiePie Fiverr controversy. You probably already know all about that situation, so I'm not going to go into details about that. Ethan defended PewDiePie when mainstream media was attacking him left and right for the controversy that happened when he paid people on Fiverr to do some crazy things. Now Ethan's main point is that PewDiePie's jokes were taken out of context by mainstream media, removing the joke that the entire video was structured around getting them to do things that he couldn't believe they were going to do, trying to get them to do crazy things and proving just how desperate for money they were. Now, Ethan doesn't just defend PewDiePie for being taken out of context, he creates entirely new context to the joke on top of being taken out of context.
He found a guy who impersonates Jesus and got him to say Hitler did absolutely nothing wrong.
You know, it's kind of funny. Ethan said this with so much confidence that back in the day, I didn't question it for a second. However, if you watch PewDiePie's video about the situation, he himself doesn't seem so sure that he's even the one that bought the clip.
Jesus says that he didn't say anything bad, but in my second video, I caught Jesus saying Hitler did nothing wrong. I wasn't the one who made him say it. Or was it? I don't think so.
Now, I want to note something here, but I want to make it clear that it's not proof of anything. This is just speculation on my part because websites do change over time. However, on Fiverr, a seller's profile allows you to view examples, reviews, and place an order from the profile page. Now, if you watch PewDiePie's clip, it seems to be played from a page that he has access to place an order, meaning he was most likely on the profile page when he was doing this, not reviewing an order he had made. Now, this isn't the only inconsistency between Ethan and PewDiePie's versions. Ethan also says something new about Keemstar.
Subscribe to Keemstar. He's making a joke about Keemstar, making it sound like he's anti-Semitic.
Now, unfortunately, in doing my research and going back and watching all the videos and reading tweets and things, I can't find a single point where PewDiePie references why he said Keemstar. Keep in mind, he also used Jacksepticeye in a similar fashion with Jesus.
Paid $8 for this.
Hi, this is Jesus. And I just wanted to say, subscribe to my favorite channel on YouTube, Jackspedicy2.
Jackspedicy.
Now, in my opinion, if the joke really was to make Keemstar sound like an anti-Semite, that would have actually been a stronger argument than just saying that he was trying to get them to say edgy things, thinking they wouldn't do it. I don't know, I just find it weird that PewDiePie would choose Jacksepticeye because friend, and then Keemstar because reasons. Let's make him look like an anti-Semite. And then PewDiePie himself never actually addressed that. Instead, we hear it from Ethan. Can you see why I might be a little bit skeptical about this? And let's be clear, this isn't the only time that Ethan has defended someone over jokes they made with not only flawed, but made up context. On February 1st of 2019, they talked about Kevin Hart's controversy, where jokes he had made in what they called a movie had been viewed as homophobic and used to get him fired from a hosting gig at a major award show. Ethan complains about the person not noting how old the situation was, because it had been years at this point, and it seemed like important context.
Well, here, let me see. It says the year here on these. What year is this from? They were quite old. Of course, he cut out the year.
So he clearly takes issue here with altering information or context to shame Kevin Hart out of his position. Then minutes later in the episode, Hila notes that she hadn't seen the scene, and Ethan never says he did, but says it was taken out of context.
Even if he said that today, it's tasteless, but like, not that bad.
Kind of hard to translate.
It's out of context.
Was it, Ethan? Was it really? I mean, it's a stand-up special, not a typical movie. It was a joke, but it's kind of hard to take a joke that you quote verbatim out of context, isn't it?
I'm gonna tell you guys one of my biggest fears. One of my biggest fears is my son growing up and being gay.
Now, full disclosure, I'm actually a fan of Kevin Hart. I enjoy his stand-up specials a lot. I've seen this one multiple times, and it's one of my favorite works of his. Now, I agree with Ethan that it seems that this person took a joke that Kevin Hart made and said, well, this might be a joke, but it seems like it speaks to something deeper within Kevin Hart. Because he made this joke, he's homophobic. You know, Ethan, I'd really love to know how this is different than what you did to Kaceytron. Oh, don't worry, we're not done here yet. We still haven't talked about where he made up context to defend Kevin Hart.
As a parent, you know being gay is harder than being straight because you have to deal with more challenges in your life, because I think probably if you're gay, there's more challenges. One, you're not considered normal by a lot of people, so you have to adjust to not being like most of the people around you. Okay?
No, they have a hard time.
It's more challenging. Let's say that. I think that's a fair thing to say. So you could even interpret it as him saying, look, I don't want my son to go through a more challenging childhood.
Now, in my opinion, this seemingly proves that Ethan had no idea what he was talking about. He was basing his opinion of a stand-up special joke off of the text version that quoted it verbatim, but it was taken out of context. How on earth can you constantly take legitimate stands on things, but still say that, well, I'm just an entertainer? How does that work? How can you defend something by saying it's taken out of context without actually seeing it and knowing the context? So again, 4 instances over 2 situations where Ethan is either portraying his opinion as fact, or he's the only person that has that information somehow. And again, I agree with Ethan's general stance that things being taken out of context to destroy somebody's career or whatever is a horrible thing. But it's not necessarily any better when you make up context to defend somebody. Whether he's right in his general defense of a person or not isn't my problem. It's how he goes about it. A lot of these things, yes, are admittedly small, but they show up repeatedly throughout Ethan's work. Things he's either criticizing people for or defending people for, and then he himself doing. Getting important details of a story wrong. The problem I have is he's friends with PewDiePie. He could have easily reached out and asked him for a fact check. Either he did and Pewds gave him different information, or he didn't and he assumed the information. Then defends Kevin Hart by saying a joke that wasn't taken out of context was taken out of context, and doubles down, creating an additional hypothetical context that he didn't even make himself. There's not even a hint of Ethan's hypothetical context in Kevin's joke. Again, it could have been very easily resolved by watching his stand-up special. On top of that, they refer to it as a movie and a scene. So if it was a movie and a scene within a movie, why would they target the actor in the scene and not the people writing, directing, or whatever? Why would you target the person that acted in the scene and blame them for the existence of the lie? That doesn't make any sense. He seems to be defending people going through serious controversy with false information, whether he's doing it on purpose or not. But you know, haha, coughing fat man equals funny, haha. Now that we have a little more context as to why I take issue with Ethan's removal of context here, I do want to say I typically would agree with Ethan that context is very important when you're talking about someone making jokes, and you really shouldn't be making fun of somebody or saying that that what they did was wrong because you took away the context, which is exactly why I have an issue with this. It's a massive hypocrisy. This isn't small. This goes against a massive defense that he's made for years. So let's move on to the weakest argument I saw in defense of censoring this clip: monetization. I saw quite a few people using the argument that Ethan was probably worried about getting demonetized, worried that the video would get demonetized because they were inciting violence towards protected groups. Now, the problem with that logic is it's not even a violent act, first of all. Secondly, Ethan himself said genocide. Genocide, as far as words go, it describes just about the most violent thing that you could ever describe. It's about as violent as an act can be. By comparison to implying you were going to cough on a bunch of old people, yeah, Ethan was the one that was... Now imagine that. He censored the words old and poor people, but he himself said corona genocide. And the logic there is that he censored it to avoid sounding like he was... Are you stupid? Now, an even more obvious flaw in this logic is that Ethan not only titled the video Morons of the Coronavirus, but then repeated coronavirus throughout the video. When this video was released, there were strict rules in place that only specific approved places were allowed to talk about coronavirus and remain monetized. People like doctors or news organizations that were verified by YouTube to be valuable enough to remain monetized. Places that I would assume YouTube as well as Google felt comfortable enough basically verifying as credible sources of information about the coronavirus. And I really doubt that H3H3 was labeled a valuable source of coronavirus information.
Some fucking dude who's about to watch my employee eat a jar of mayonnaise. What research do you expect me to do exactly?
They didn't hesitate anywhere to talk about the coronavirus, and you think that was it? I don't remember a single time they've ever censored a thing in their videos. And you think that was it? It's all just entertainment, Jake. You're taking it too seriously. Stop being such a hater. We're talking about a guy who had a potential presidential candidate on his show and has talked multiple times openly about politics on his show, on his Twitter account, on his videos. We're talking about a guy who practically predicted 7 million people were going to die from the coronavirus in a very short period of time. And we're talking about a guy who's made legitimate stands on behalf of people on both of his channels and got the information wrong. So in summary, it's my opinion that Ethan is walking a very dangerous tightrope between being an entertainer that doesn't have to watch what he says or be careful at all, and being a guy that has politicians on his show, talks politics when they're not there, talks about the coronavirus even without an expert present. It's my opinion that Ethan wants to have his cake and eat it too. Getting something wrong on a podcast is one thing when it's a spur of the moment conversation, but when you pick the topic in advance and had time to fact check a serious defense of the person and don't do it, or when you spend the time to record a video that you research to make a serious defense of a friend, you should have plenty of time in editing to catch the mistake or even text your friend. Maybe it's just me, Maybe this isn't a real concern, but imagine if you knew a news source was getting this kind of information wrong and researched and edited and still put out. And maybe I'm wrong about Ethan obscuring content, not clarifying what Casey said, then portraying a joke as real so that he could make her look worse to strengthen his point about stupid people regarding the virus, not being a sign of serious issues with Ethan as he is now. And I want to be clear here. I'm not saying I think Ethan's a bad guy. I don't know that. I don't know Ethan. I mean, I even saw today on Twitter he announced that they are giving away money to people who need it. But these situations are just a few from the last few years that show a consistent issue with his work. I hope things change, and I hope the best for the whole H3 team. I honestly doubt it matters to them because they've received an unwarranted amount of hate for quite some time. But they've lost another viewer now, as I can't really just ignore and consume anymore. I want to give a special thanks as always to the patron saints, Bo Blacks, Pantsless Gamers, Lady Zubat, and This Is Ewan. I absolutely cannot thank you enough for all the support, guys. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please remember to like it if you liked it, and if you feel like it, hop over to my Twitch account at twitch.tv/internetunwind, where I never know what I'm going to be doing because it's total chaos.
What did Michael Jackson say to little kids in the middle of the night in his bedroom?